Rick and Morty is getting a spin-off, and I gotta say, it is not at all what I expected. Turns out President Andre Curtis, the president in Rick and Morty, is getting his own series on Adult Swim. Maybe not who I would have gone with, but let's talk about it. Okay, so this new Rick and Morty spin-off is simply titled President Curtis, which I guess makes sense. The other show's just names, Rick and Morty, so they're calling it President Curtis. President Curtis has also obviously been played by Keith David, who will be returning to the role for the spin-off series, which I would say is probably the biggest win in the win column for this spin-off. Keith David is a legend, one of the greatest voices in the industry, in all of voiceover. When he's the star of your show, you're in a pretty good place, even if maybe this was a strange choice for a spin-off series. I guess Keith David tweeted, "We're diving into the Oval Office, but not the one you're used to." I don't know what that means, but I guess we'll see. Maybe it's just an allusion to the sort of like deep state type of stuff we might explore here. So the series is co-created by Harmon and James Siciliano. So Keith David is reprising his role, and he's going to be joined by Brooklyn Nine-Nine's Stephanie Beatriz, who also does a lot of other voiceover. She's in BoJack Season 5. She's a main character in Has Been Hotel. She's no stranger to voiceover. And then also Community's Jim Rash, who is one of my favorite comedic actors out there. I think he's like deeply underrated, one of the funniest guys to ever do it, who actually worked with Keith David on the final season of Community. So here is the logline / synopsis for the series. President Curtis follows the commander-in-chief and his eccentric staff as they tackle the kind of crises that Rick Sanchez could never be bothered with, from interdimensional diplomacy to paranormal investigations and unexplained phenomena. So a lot of people are pointing out that this kinda sounds like Inside Job. And it does. That's true. They're kind of filling the gap that Inside Job left after it was canceled by Netflix, which is strange. I would just rather have more Inside Job personally. I feel like that show at least had characters that I really cared about, and they had really interesting dynamics, and it was kind of a fun world. This, I hope they find a way to differentiate this from Rick and Morty. I do like the angle that it's less kind of insane than Rick and Morty. It's more X-Files than it is, you know, like interdimensional. It could be a fun sort of procedural type Rick and Morty show that's dealing with the more, you know, domestic supernatural phenomena. This is, I guess, technically the second Rick and Morty spinoff, if you want to include the Vindicators miniseries on YouTube, which I always forget about, so I'm sure many of you will not count that one. The Adult Swim president, Mykal also had this to say about the show. "This is a series we would have greenlit even if it didn't have anything at all to do with Rick and Morty. President Andre Curtis is just that good of a character. The rest of the world the team has fleshed out is super fun and totally stands on its own. We can't wait for you to see it." Obviously, it's his job to say this kind of stuff, but I do hope this is true. Like, that is exactly what I hope to see from this show. I hope it really stands on its own outside of its connections to Rick and Morty. Like, it might be fun if there's some direct connections to the other show, but I'd rather get like a fun deep state X-Files type procedural comedy than something that's just like, all right, when are we waiting for the next reference to something Rick and Morty related? Keith David was asked what the emotional core of the show was, and he said he really is a good person and that he has values, and he wants to make sure that the people around him stay true to that or get back to that. It's pretty basic, but that's what you want. You want to have a likable main character, which I would say maybe Rick and Morty struggles with, but I hope that's true. I will say, I feel like they probably should have made a Rick and Morty spinoff 5 or 6 years ago. This feels a little late in the run as interest kind of wanes in Rick and Morty in general for them to be introducing a spinoff. I feel like this maybe would have really popped off after season 4 or 5. It's not to say that it can't work, and it's not to say that it might not be good. This could be like the American Dad to Rick and Morty's Family Guy, where it's not as popular, but the people who watch it are like, actually, it's like low-key kind of better. Who knows? It could be that one. I would not have chosen President Curtis as a main character, but I do understand the premise being what they're going for here with the sort of X-Files procedural comedy Inside Job type thing. And also I totally understand being like, oh, can we get Keith David to be the main character of our show? Let's probably do that. We should probably get Keith David. That totally tracks. Like, that all makes a lot of sense. It still just kind of feels a little late in the Rick and Morty run for this to be the move. I feel like 5 years ago, if they announced a Rick and Morty movie, that shit would have been the craziest, biggest deal in the world. A Rick and Morty movie would have probably made bank, and now I cannot imagine that doing as well. I'm going to go back and forth on this because I am often very plugged into the Twitter of it all and the fandom in the comment sections and the Reddit and like the diehards. A lot of that seems to have dwindled. But the general public does still watch the out of Rick and Morty. Like when Rick and Morty hits HBO Max, that stuff is binged. It's clearly a really popular show. There's a reason that they've continued to renew it through season 12 at this point and greenlit a spinoff. It's probably doing really well on streaming, and it probably is a really popular show to just general audiences. But I do feel like the perception of the show has pendulum swung pretty negatively in the last few years. I think this latest season, season 8, has been very good. Actually, 7 and 8. I thought 7 and 8 were two of the best seasons in a very long time. And I've had a little bit more interest the last couple of years, not seeing as much interest from the fans. I also think fans don't know the show is back right now. I mean, some do, but like, it feels like the show is not doing next day streaming on HBO anymore or on Hulu. And that is a huge detriment to the just marketing and people knowing that the show is back. I even stopped talking about the new season only because Turner was on my ass about copyright, which was annoying because A, it's fair use, it's legal, they're in the legal wrong there, and B, I'm doing promotion for your show, guys. I'm giving you free promotion for a show that your fan base doesn't seem to understand is back. I got so many comments every time I made a video being like, oh my God, Rick and Morty is back? I had no idea. I'm doing your jobs for you and you're trying to stop me. So, I stopped talking about the show and you can eat my ass. How about that? But this could be good. I'm like excited. I'm excited to see what they have to say with this character. I'm excited to see how it differentiates itself from Rick and Morty, to be less space travel-y. Again, the domestic supernatural phenomena. I think that could be fun. And I'm eager to see like what writers they've got on this and how many of them have come over from the Rick and Morty writers room and how they go about doing a season of Rick and Morty with a season of President Curtis. Are they doing both in 1 year? Are they going to alternate? Are they going to do 1 year Rick and Morty, 1 year President Curtis? Will it go beyond one season? Will they try to run President Curtis concurrently with through the end of Rick and Morty's whatever they have left? They have seasons 9, 10, 11, and 12 remaining on their contract. Although, if I'm being honest, I do think Rick and Morty will probably get renewed again. I know interest has dwindled and the perception is that it's not popular and people don't like it anymore. It's still one of the most popular animated shows on TV, and it's probably going to continue. I mean, I would put money on 20 seasons. Is that crazy? With some of the stuff we've seen that runs forever, I feel like Rick and Morty can keep going. Okay, I think that's what we got. President Curtis spinoff. What do you guys think? Are you guys interested in this? I feel like the Keith David of it all gives me hope. I'm like, well, if you got Keith David as a main character, that could be pretty exciting. But, also, you should have done this 6 years ago. I also, don't love his episodes, but I guess I like the character. The character's fine. I just don't really care for the rivalry thing with Rick and Curtis. So maybe it will be interesting to see him kind of stand on his own outside of that rivalry with Rick. Maybe he'll be a little bit more likable of a character when it's not just a dick measuring contest with Rick Sanchez every time. So those are my thoughts. Give me your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned. I got more San Diego Comic-Con coverage coming up about other animated shows, and we'll talk next time. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.